Banks step in to stop customers losing money from crypto deals. The federal government announces big fines and regulatory changes to tackle the PwC tax leak scandal. And Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, is proving his chops again despite turbulence in the US markets. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It is Monday, the 7th of August, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show, you've got a really good interview coming up today. You're speaking with Brian Hahn, who we've spoken to before. He's the Director of Equities Research Australia New Zealand at Morningstar.
Yeah, so every month Morningstar come out and say these are the picks we like for the next month or so. And we talked to Brian about some of the stocks they like locally and overseas, but also the stocks that they've sold in the past month, the ones that, they obviously like, but their share price has hit a certain level and they've decided to get out. So it's a great chat for investors.
Absolutely. And of course, we're not an investing podcast and you should seek professional advice before making any investment decisions, but it's just really interesting to hear what a professional like Brian thinks. That's coming up a little bit later on. The main story this morning, though, Sean, more major Australian banks, including the Commonwealth Bank, are limiting the amount customers can pay to cryptocurrency exchanges. They're saying this is a defensive action due to too many customers losing money to scams.
Yeah, so Commonwealth Bank have changed their terms and conditions in terms of a customer's ability to pay crypto exchanges. In fact, there's a limit now of no more than $10,000 per calendar month across all accounts. For new customers, this kicked in on 29 July. Existing customers are being given 30 days notice. Effectively, it's limiting how much money you can put into crypto. They're not restricting withdrawals from exchanges, though. It's worth noting that. The Australian Competition Regulator, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, found $220 million was lost to scammers via cryptocurrency last year, and more is expected to be lost in 2023. Of course, anyone watching crypto shouldn't be too surprised by this. National Australia Bank, Westpac, ANZ and Commonwealth previously have been declining and delaying transactions made to high-risk crypto exchanges over the past few months. Corporate regulator ASIC has been telling the banks to do more to protect customers, and there are calls on the banks to pay more in compensation to scam victims.
So is there a bit of self-interest in this then, Sean? Is this an effort to avoid refunding customers from scams?
It's an interesting issue. In the UK, banks are being forced by the government to repay victims of scams unless the customer was negligent or making fraudulent claims. That's billions of dollars off the bottom line of those UK banks. In Australia, fewer than 5% of fraud and scam victims get refunded by major banks. Financial Services Minister Stephen Jones previously said the Australian government would do something that travels in the same direction as the UK. So certainly it is a step that way. Some banks in the UK have been banning customers from sending any money to crypto exchanges due to a relatively high proportion turning out to be fraudulent. So it's possible that the Aussie banks are worried crypto could burn a hole in their pockets, hence they're clamping down on people being allowed to use crypto exchanges.
That's a fascinating story. Local markets, Sean, how did we finish up on Friday?
Well, the S&P ASX 200 finished up just a touch to 7,325 points. Overall for the week, it was down about 1%. On Friday, healthcare stocks struggled while the energy sector did pretty well. Michael, of course, very big week for markets this week. The June half earnings season kicks off today. Big week coming up. Some of the better-known companies reporting include James Hardie tomorrow, Suncorp and Commonwealth Bank on Wednesday. Later in the week, there's AMP, QBE, AGL, Newcrest Mining and REA. They're all due to report. Just means that we're going to be very, very, very busy.
But that's exciting, isn't it?
It is exciting. I mean, I like profit season because you really do find out what's going inside companies.
And actually, it was what you said a couple of weeks ago. And again, more evidence, Sean, that I listened to what you say, that it's not just them reporting their results, it is them saying what they expect is going to happen. And that's almost the more important part, kind of what they think the outlook is. And I have learned that from you.
That's right. I mean, professional investors buy and sell shares not on what's happening today, but what they think will happen in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, 18 months' time. And this is a real indication of what is happening or what will happen in a year's time or so. So this is often you see quite a bit of movement in share prices and that as well.
Yeah, it's an exciting week. So what's happening in international markets?
The S&P 500 had a bit of a tough run over last week. It closed down 0.5% over the weekend. It was down almost 2.5% for the week. It followed US labour data showing that the labour force or the employment market is slowing. More on that a bit later. The tech-heavy Nasdaq fell 0.3%. On Friday, US time, the Dow was down about 0.4%. In terms of companies, some big moves. Amazon, it jumped 8% after reporting sales for the quarter that defied fears of a retail slowdown. Apple, however, fell 5%, the worst day since the end of September last year, on the back of soft sales of devices. Plenty going on Wall Street.
Yeah, there certainly is. All right, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the federal government has responded to the PwC scandal by increasing fines 100-fold, removing secrecy rules hampering the tax office, and giving regulators more power.
Treasury will also undertake a 2-year review of the regulation of all professional firms as part of the changes unveiled yesterday by Treasurer Jim Chalmers. Penalties could rise to as much as $780 million under the changes. Legislations will be introduced later this year. I'm sure it will have the backing of most parties in this case. The idea is to give the Tax Practitioners Board more disciplinary options, powers to protect whistleblowers, and extra time for investigations. We've spoken about the PwC tax leaks scandal, which is when, of course, if people haven't been listening, one of the PwC partners learnt information about the government's tax policy because he was working for the government, then used that to attract clients to PwC. The actual end result of that debacle is far more widespread than PwC. It'll affect law firms, legal firms, engineering firms, all sorts of places. It's quite incredible, the implications that will come from this.
Yeah, it is a story that will continue to unfold for quite some time to come. Sean, the housing market has continued to soften in major capital cities, with weekend auction results suggesting there's a little bit of buyer nervousness out there.
Well, yes, so clearance rates for the weekend's auctions dropped below 70% for the first time in 5 months in Sydney. There were about 700 homes that went on sale in the harbour city. That was down about 6% on the previous week. In Melbourne, the clearance rate held above 70%, but there was about a 12% decline in the number of homes on the market. It's kind of about the outlook for interest rates here. Certainly plenty of uncertainty around. Also, you just get the feel that the heat in the pickup in the housing market has just sort of, what you don't take the heat out. What do? You suppose the thermometer's turned down or something or other.
You just cool it. It's just...
Oh, yeah, good point. It's cooled.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. I'm not going to draw attention to that one, Sean. I feel like if I was to do the same thing and ask that same question, you would just have a field day.
I'd be all over you.
Indeed. Now, federal Labor has signalled its policy position on artificial intelligence and protecting workers in affected industries. I don't think I remember the last time I described AI as artificial intelligence. You know how it's just one of those things where the initialism or the acronym has just become so commonplace that you don't even think now that AI actually stands for artificial intelligence.
Yeah, ASIC, ACCC, AI. Yeah, I'm with you.
Rolls off the tongue. Please go on.
The policy draft, which will become part of Labor's national platform, was reported by the Sydney Morning Herald and puts workers' rights at the centre of the agenda. The new policy indicates Labor will be looking to introduce rules to protect against harmful uses of AI, but that also ensure productivity, competitiveness, and the creation of new businesses and ideas. The statement reinforces Labor's focus on ensuring workers in AI-affected sectors are supported for retraining and skills development. Getting the balance between economic growth and supporting affected workers and their well-being is a major focus for the government.
We've talked a lot, Sean, about the FIFA Women's World Cup. And look, really, I've got to say it, it's been kicking goals for Australian and global media businesses. Nice. It's been quite extraordinary, hasn't it?
It has been incredible. And of course, tonight we've got the Matildas playing the Danes. Let's hope that they get through. You know that over 1.715 million tickets, so 1,715,000 tickets for the games were sold by last Friday, surpassing all other women's World Cups and well above the goal of 1.5 million ticket sales. The Matildas' final group game against Canada last Monday, which we won 4-0. Of course, we mentioned this last week. It was Seven's most watched program. Over 8 million people have watched the coverage on Seven, with another 1.1 million streaming on 7 Plus. It's now less than 2 weeks until the World Cup final, which is being held in Sydney, but there's been some kickback over next week's local broadcasts. Fans will now need an Optus Sport subscription to see all of the next round of 16 matches, with only half to be shown on free-to-air. 7 is still airing the Matildas, of course, tonight versus Denmark.
Now, a big story, Sean, that we mentioned in the afternoon report on Friday, the competition regulator said allowing the $4.9 billion merger between ANZ and Suncorp Bank would, quote, further entrench an oligopoly, leading to less competition in home loans and in Queensland, agricultural and business banking.
A big announcement, this one. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has basically rejected ANZ's takeover of Suncorp Bank. Of course, Suncorp has a big insurance business as well. Both ANZ and Suncorp have flagged they're ready to appeal the decision to the Australian Competition Tribunal. ACCC Deputy Chair Mick Keogh said the acquisition, which is the biggest banking transaction since the global financial crisis in Australia, would be to the detriment of customers and raise the risk of coordination between major banks on loan pricing. A newly merged ANZ Suncorp would hold about 15.7% of mortgages. That would put it in number 3 position, in front of National Australia Bank, behind Commonwealth Bank and Westpac, of course. It would also have about 14% of household deposits. But of course, it's been knocked back. So unless something happens at the tribunal, it ain't going to happen.
Sean, the federal government has launched its consultation into the $2.7 trillion managed investment scheme sector.
The governor's called for submissions about the sector as part of the review. It's focused on the classification of wholesale versus retail funds, whether certain schemes should even be marketed and sold to clients, and crucially, what type of investor rights are appropriate. There's lots of cash tied up in this one. It's going to be critical the government balances consumer protections with red tape reduction. Very big issue, this, about how you can market selling managed funds, whether investors are sophisticated enough. I mean, it's part of the reason we always say go and get your professional advice, because we aren't professionals in this, but us telling you about what's going on, we have to be very careful that we don't step over the line in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Recapping, Sean, Friday's quarterly monetary policy statement from the Reserve Bank, the central bank has downgraded its economic growth forecasts slightly as higher interest rates and the increasing cost of living put pressure on spending.
Yes, economic growth will expand by just 0.9% this calendar year, down from the previous forecast of 1.2%. and below the current 2.3% pace that we have been experiencing. Inflation's forecast to decline from 6% to be about 4% by December, 3.25% in 12 months after that, and back to the 2 to 3% target range in late 2025. Unemployment currently is 3.5%. It's expected to rise somewhat. Wages growth has picked up to its highest rate in a decade. It's now around 3.5 to 4%. It's also expected to strengthen in the second half of this year because of ongoing tightness in the labour market. The conclusion to all this, as per the Reserve Bank's view, the board remains resolute in its determination to return inflation to target and do whatever is necessary to achieve that outcome.
All right, Sean, turning to international news. Now, diplomats in the US and China are negotiating 3 joint working groups focused on major areas of geographic and strategic interest. This is a pretty big signal, isn't it? The relations are developing and improving somewhat between the global superpowers.
I think you're right, Michael. An Asia-Pacific Regional Issues Group, Maritime Focused Group, and a third Broader Issues Group are all being discussed, according to the Financial Times. This is likely to come to fruition over the next few months. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs Director General and the North American and Oceania Affairs Department, Yang Tao, was in Washington late last month, speaking with his US counterparts. It's going to be a very busy time for bilateral relations. Reuters is reporting that US President Joe Biden is likely to issue an executive order to screen outbound investments in sensitive technologies to China this week. I don't think Beijing would be real happy about that one. It could give him the power to veto investments. This would largely focus on US private equity, venture capital, and joint venture investments in semiconductors, quantum computing, and AI in China.
Sean, we mentioned this one at the top of the show. The Oracle of Omaha is doubling down on his strategy despite the US losing its AAA rating. And with good reason. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway cash and investments hit a near all-time high of $147 billion US dollars at the end of the second quarter. Is that a yawn? Is it just...
No, it's just anything but a yawn. It's just like... He just keeps doing it, Warren Buffett.
It's just amazing, isn't it? And just these numbers are staggering, aren't they? And the name Oracle of Omaha, there's just so much kind of mystique and prestige and intrigue around everything that he does. It's no wonder that investors and people are just drawn to him.
Yeah, I mean, so his holdings during the June quarter jumped to $17 billion. In 2021, his total cash and investments hit $149 billion. So he's now at $147 billion. So, whatever you criticize Warren Buffett for, he just continues to deliver for shareholders. So he's almost at that all-time high again. $120 billion or so is invested in short-term treasury bills. That means he's got plenty of money to spend. Last week, Buffett was interviewed by CNBC saying his company's investment strategy would stay solid. He said he's still planning to buy $10 billion worth of US treasuries this week, with the only question in his mind being whether they are 3 or 6 month bills. Basically, he's very keen to hold treasury bills at the moment.
And still in the US, Sean, the US economy could be on the verge of cooling at last, but there's considerable uncertainty in the outlook.
Yeah, each day there seems to be different figures coming out, and you can sort of decide whether you're upbeat or downbeat about the US economy. The Labor Department released employment data on Friday US time showing 187,000 jobs were added to the ranks in July, and unemployment fell back to a near record low of 3.5%. There's still a strong jobs market, and earnings are up solidly, but the job gains are below the 200,000 pace for only the second month since January 2021. Consumer price index data for the US is due out this week, with economists expecting to see just a slight increase in July. There's still not a lot of clarity about what's happening in the inflation market, whether or not it has slowed enough. Former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers told Bloomberg it's too early to be confident inflation won't re-accelerate really, down the track.
All right. Up next, Sean, is the Fear and Greed daily interview. Today you are speaking with Brian Hahn from Morningstar.
All about investing and investing in Australia. Also, we talk about, he's got a couple of favourites in the US, a couple of favourites in Europe, and then we also talk about investing in Asia.
Yeah, and also some good listening today with Stephen Koukoulas, our resident economist for Fear and Greed the week ahead.
Yeah, not a lot going on this week. There's National Australia Bank Business Survey. There's a Westpac Consumer Sentiment Survey. But it's great hearing Stephen's take of where the economy's up to post last week, which was a massive week with obviously interest rate decision, but retail sales disappointing, building approvals figures, all sorts of things. So well worth a listen. That one too.
Yeah, and if you're eyeing off the Fear and Greed playlist, the Fear and Greed Business News playlist on your podcast platform, whether you're listening via Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever it is, you're checking it out over the weekend and you notice something a little unusual in the playlist on Sunday, it's because we released a bonus episode. It was actually a special feature episode of our sister podcast, How Do They Afford That? And we put it into the Fear and Greed playlist because it features our very own Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang, talking about how to get a pay rise.
And something we'll use against Adam in the future if we need to ask him for a pay rise.
He's really just given us the recipe, hasn't he?
He has.
He's just given us everything. Yeah. We can just go through that now with the like the checkbox, the list, and just go tick, 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 tick. There is no way now he can knock us back.
I hope he's listening.
I hope so too. All right. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Monday, the 7th of August, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn and Instagram, X and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was the Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.